the G7 summit. What are you focusing on, and what should you be focusing on? And who is it that determines focus? Because when you have a legacy media so prone to hysteria and so willing to censor, our interpretation and understanding of reality is understandably warped. First of all, we're going to start off with what everyone's talking about: Joe Biden's moment of extraordinary ineptitude and extraordinary personal struggle. But what I want you to pay attention to is not the fact that the apparent leader of the free world is apparently willing to completely ignore a paraglider. Like, the important bit of information for the G7, the nominated 7 most powerful nations in the world, excluding Russia and China. I mean, that's one of the probably evident problems of the entire setup. You know, firstly, what is the G7 for? What is this odd conglomeration? What is this hidden in plain sight cartel of the powerful, meeting to legitimize a $50 billion increase in funding of the Ukraine-Russia war over 10 years, continuing to fund the Azov battalion that are declaredly, explicitly Nazi, actual Nazi, not like, you know, when you're looking at Tucker Carlson, who you might not be able to see on meta platforms anymore because a little thing flips up to tell you that he is persona non grata, or not maybe right-wing in the way that some of Alex Jones's amazing Christian evangelical sermons have extraordinary threads of patriotism and nationalism woven within them. No, I mean Nazis like swastikas, like what we used to understand Nazism to mean. You're going to be funding that for the next 10 years. BlackRock are going to be benefiting from that. We already know that. We've seen Zelensky publicly at the Golden Globes say stuff like, thank you, BlackRock, thank you very much, Goldman Sachs.
BlackRock, JP Morgan, and Goldman Sachs.
We've seen how this thing operates. Now, we're being invited to pay attention to the obvious decline in ineptitude of Joe Biden, which leads us, of course, to appreciate and understand he can't be the leader of the free world, can he? Because he can't even focus on a man landing on a parachute in front of his face. He can't even honor in the right direction when it's D-Day. He can't find his way off of an empty stage, let alone fight his way out of a paper bag. So while we're being distracted by the sad decline of a frail individual who wants 4 more years in office to augment and augur further expensive packages to lead us closer to Armageddon, we have to ask this question: who's in charge? Who's really in charge, if not this guy? And why would we give them another 4 years? And why are the legacy media not reporting on it? I mean, for a start, it's bloody stupid, isn't it? It's a bloody stupid PR stunt. What's going to happen is a guy's going to land on a parachute in front of the 7 leaders and Ursula von der Leyen, who has personal text exchanges with Albert Bourla of Pfizer that were publicly revealed to include deals for billions and billions of pounds, dollars, sterling, pick a currency, while you still can, before they're all CBDCs. That's been exposed. They stand there and on a golf course or whatever the hell they're standing on there to sort of demonstrate some kind of unity for a PR stunt. But dear Joe Biden is simply incapable of participating in that moment. As is often the case, he's looking in the wrong direction, perhaps honoring some invisible army of fallen soldiers. Perhaps, I don't know, reaching back into his past for a memory that demonstrates how down with the people he is. Perhaps he's concocting some new narrative for us to believe in that the legacy media, Morning Joe, CNN et al. Will amplify in accordance with establishment wishes that can't possibly be being enacted by that guy because he can't even participate in a simple PR stunt that's in itself distracting us from the fact that another $50 billion is going to fund a 10-year plan to perpetuate a war between Ukraine and Russia, using to pay back that debt, and this is the bit where it gets truly terrifying, frozen Russian assets, which is another Putin red line, which means that this is another escalation in hostilities between NATO countries and Russia. These G7s, these NATOs, they're making these decisions for us. They're presenting us with these PR stunts while Russian submarines cruise the warm waters of the Caribbean, and the likelihood of Armageddon becomes ever, ever greater. There's something deeply human about watching these unpopular, and in some cases like Maloney maybe, popular leaders deal with the human problem of Joe Biden, wistful and adrift, staring across in irrelevant green. And what do? It's the Italian leader, Maloney, who eventually, in a fantastic pink suit, decides to usher him back into the main frame. Macron has had to call elections in his country because he's so unpopular. Rishi is a laughing stock in the UK. Justin Trudeau on the edge of frame, on the edge of the meaning of his own name, because it ain't true though, is it? If an Italian leader who ideologically is significantly at odds with Joe Biden, out of human compassion, is required to usher him back into a photo op, imagine what's going on in the corridors of power. Imagine what influence the lobbyists of Big Pharma, the military-industrial complex, and other specific regional war matters are able to assert over this commander-in-chief who wants from you another 4 years, who wants from you more taxes, who wants from you the ability to perpetuate an unwinnable war against Russia, and is using frozen Russian assets as part of this G7 summit conference. That's the subject of this. Can we take frozen Russian assets and give them to Ukraine? Can you imagine how irritating that's going to be to Putin? No wonder they have to work hard to control media spaces. No wonder every single dissenting voice is either shut down or smeared. And if they're willing to use money derived from Russian assets to continue to support this Ukrainian war, including a declared and explicit Nazi battalion, how can we believe them when they say they are censoring independent media voices because they might say something hurtful? How can we believe that? Because if you cared about Nazis and the impact of Nazis, you wouldn't fund them in an actual war, would you? Let me know what you think. Awaken Wonders in the chat. While we're getting distracted by more displays of decline, Joe Rogan believes that there may not even be a Joe Biden, that he may be an AI project. Elsewhere across this G7 summit, you see all sorts of human blunders and misdemeanors and awkwardness and ridiculousness. But what I think is significant is we're heading towards an election, and everywhere we look, significant independent media voices are being closed down. Tucker's under attack. Alex Jones is under attack. Joe Rogan was attacked during the height of the pandemic. I've been attacked. Unless you're being brought down, you're obviously saying what they want you to say. That's the conclusion I'm reaching. Let me know what you think. If I just put on my sunglasses now. As a fellow human being and as a person who ultimately cares about the spiritual welfare of all, it's, as usual, pretty sad to see this. On a human and global scale, though, we do have to consider that the purpose of this summit is to derive further funding for an unwinnable war using frozen Russian assets to support, among other military assets, Nazi battalions, continuing to use your tax dollars to fund a war that can't be won, approaching an election that we possibly can't trust the outcomes of. We certainly can't trust the way it's being reported on when everywhere you look, dissenting voices are being shut down. There they are. That's what it comes down to. That's the powerful. There, on the right of the frame, standing next to the embarrassed Italian leader, Joe Biden, asking you for 4 more years, asking you for more tax dollars, asking you to continue a war that appears to be escalating way beyond his control, and the limits of his control appear not even to extend to the ability to stand in a simple photograph. If you can't organize a photograph, how are you going to organize world peace? You'd be better off running your own life. You cannot and you should not trust these peculiar authoritarian forces. By supporting our partners, you're supporting our content. Let me ask you a serious question. Do you ever wonder what happened to martial arts legend and film star Chuck Norris? Yes, every day. I spend hours thinking about... Right, well, I've got the answer. Chuck Norris is 81 now. He's still active. He's strong. He's kicking ass. And he still has energy to spend on his beautiful grandchildren. He feels like he's in his 50s. How can this be possible? Chuck's made a video that explains this extraordinary story, and you can watch it by visiting chuckdefense.com/brand. Click the link below to watch this video now. It's going to change the way you think and feel, not only about Chuck Norris, which is invitation enough, but about your own health and about your own ability to age with vitality, vigor, strength, and potency. So go to chuckdefense.com/brand and watch this video now. You're not going to believe how simple it is. Chuck's 81 years old. That's, I mean, for a president of the United States, that's still young, a spring chicken. But for a regular person, that's elderly. This guy's got more energy even than me. And look at me, I can do this. Chuck Norris showed me how to do that. Chuck focused on 3 simple things that sabotage the body as we age. Watch his method. Click the link in the description. chuckdefense.com/brand. This is going to blow your mind and knock your socks off. I want my socks left on. You're going to lose your socks. Let's go back to the content. The G7 summit, even when it's spoken about candidly on legacy media, is about organizing global resources to perpetuate, I suppose you'd have to say, a globalist agenda. Let's have a look at this bit of legacy media reporting. They obviously don't mention the extraordinary moment of awkwardness or any of the other peculiar moments that occur when the humanity of the participants occasionally breaches. What they will tell you, though, is what this summit is ultimately about. Have a look at this.
This morning, we have important news from Italy, where President Biden is meeting with other world leaders at this year's G7 summit. They got a big agenda, including talking about more aid for Ukraine as it tries to hold off Russia's army.
It essentially commits the U.S. to supporting Ukraine for the next 10 years. We're talking about military training, weapons assistance, intelligence sharing, and more. Biden and the other G7 leaders are hoping to finalize a plan for a $50 billion loan to Ukraine so that the country can do things like rebuild infrastructure that has been destroyed, produce more of its own weaponry so it doesn't have to rely on the rest of the world. And here's the interesting part. The loan would be paid back using the interest from Russian assets that have been frozen by countries around the world since Russia invaded Ukraine 2.5 years ago.
That is interesting. That's interesting that we're going to be in a nuclear war. Nuclear wars are interesting because you get to confront mortality. How interesting it is to die from a massive explosion. That's an intriguing development for all of us. So for the next 10 years, this war or this conflict in some form is going to be perpetuated. You've probably seen already the CBDCs that are going to be implemented. You've probably already seen that elections are cancelled and that media has been centralized. You're probably aware of all of these peculiar contradictions. Let's focus for a moment on the fact that this war is going to be continuing, that we're going to continue to fund this war, and that another red line has been crossed in using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's war against Russia. This seems like an outrageous provocation and escalation in hostilities between the two countries. No wonder you're having to shut down dissenting independent media voices, because if you had access to alternative media, if you had alternative opinions available, if we were able to achieve a consensus, then how would they be able to continue to facilitate such unpopular activity? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in the chats what you think about that. And if Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones were really being censored for moral reasons, like because Alex Jones says something unforgivable. And if Tucker Carlson is being condemned, like I saw on a CNN piece, that Ticketmaster shouldn't sell Tucker Carlson's live tickets because he's a racist and he believes in this idea and that idea. If by their own analysis, if by their own commentary that's true, then you wouldn't continue to fund actual Nazis, would you? You wouldn't, would you? If it was about morality, if it was about racism. How on earth can these things live together? How can they live in combination? What is this confectionery we're being invited to eat? Now you've seen like CBS talking about this. Let's have a look at Anti-Wars reporting on this. So G7 leaders agreed at a summit in Italy on Thursday to give Ukraine $50 billion using frozen Russian central bank assets, a step that marks a significant escalation in the economic war against Russia. The plan is to provide $50 billion to Ukraine by the end of the year in the form of a loan which will be paid back using profits from the approximately $280 billion in frozen Russian assets held by the US and its allies. I feel like I'd want to be consulted on a decision like that. For a moment, it's interesting to marry together the image we've just seen of those 7 human beings, plus Ursula von der Leyen, constant text buddy of Albert Bourla, standing there as once again Joe Biden looks in the wrong direction, and the obvious revelation embedded in that is that Joe Biden can't be running the country, Joe Biden can't be running the world, who is running the world, what is their agenda? All of these things endlessly spill out in front of us. How can we ignore the evident yet continually concealed or ignored truths that we're being marched towards Armageddon, and anybody that opposes their agenda is shut down? How can we continue to ignore that? Russia's made it clear it would view either plan as the theft of its sovereign funds and is preparing to retaliate. Stealing the money makes reconciliation between Russia and the West even less likely, since lifting sanctions would mean having to give assets back to Moscow that have already been spent. The move will also reduce faith in the Western banking system and speed up global de-dollarization. It doesn't seem like a particularly positive way to proceed, does it? It provokes Russia. It perpetuates war. It costs you money. It makes the world less safe. I mean, I don't know. I'm struggling to see how you benefit from this unless you financially participate in one of the companies that weaponizes Ukraine and provides them with military aid, or if you benefit generally from a climate of crisis and continual terror, or if you're looking for reasons to legitimize the censoring of your opponents. And just to, in a sense, make it even clearer that hypocrisy is at the heart of all this, some of this funding will go to literal, actual Nazis. The State Department announced on Monday it's formally lifted a ban on arming and training the Azov Brigade, an infamous Ukrainian neo-Nazi military unit. The Azov Brigade was founded as a militia in 2014, known as the Azov Battalion. We need to rebrand it. We can't be called a brigade anymore. And we can't be called a battalion anymore. It's got too many negative connotations. Let's call it the Azov Brigade. I think it's the Nazism that's causing the problem. To fight Ukrainian separatists in the Donbass, and was later absorbed by Ukraine's National Guard. US assistance to Azov was banned by an amendment in the 2018 National Defense Authorization Act. White supremacy and neo-Nazism are unacceptable and have no place in our world, said Representative Ro Khanna in 2018. I'm very pleased to see that the recently passed omnibus prevents the US from providing arms and training assistance to the neo-Nazi Azov Battalion. So, all of this talk about white supremacy and racism, the kind of pervasive ambient attacks on reporters or pundits or auteurs or public figures or independent media journalists, whatever you want to call Alex Jones or Tucker Carlson, one thing the establishment continually calls them is racist, right? That's something you hear pretty frequently. The idea is that they're being censored because what they're saying is harmful socially. But does that seem likely if you continue to fund actual explicit white supremacists and Nazis because they're politically expedient in this particular conflict? Isn't it more likely that Alex Jones and Tucker Carlson and anybody who holds an opinion that they can convey that's potentially disadvantageous will be censored for some reason or another? And they'll use the CIA, the FBI, they'll use algorithms, they'll use the legacy media, they'll use smears attacks, they'll use whatever comes to hand, because this is, let's face it, a pretty panicked project at the moment. The State Department claimed on Monday that Azov passed vetting under the Leahy law, which prohibits military aid to military units that have committed human rights abuses. US military equipment has ended up in the hands of other neo-Nazi linked groups. So it's like a Groupon for neo-Nazis. You don't get just one neo-Nazi battalion, brigade. You got to get the language right with these things. You don't offend these Nazis. There's other Nazis out there that might be participating in it. But, Alex Jones did say that thing about Sandy Hook and it was incorrect and he apologized for it. Get the CIA involved. Shut him down. That can't be the reason, can it? Joe Biden can't be running the country. The G7 can't be relied on. This war can't be won. We can't trust what they say about Alex Jones or Tucker Carlson or basically anyone. So what is reality? What is the reality we're voting for? What is the reality we're believing in? And what should we do to extricate ourselves from systems of disruption and deceit that currently controls.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.